Hello there everyone, how you doing today? I hope you're all well. Today we're going into r/entitled people, where people are, in fact, entitled. If you enjoyed today's stories, remember to like, subscribe, leave a comment down below, and all that wonderful stuff. Now, without further ado, let's get started, shall we? Entitled neighbor wants a copy of my grandma's will. When my grandmother was diagnosed with cancer, she opted for no treatment. She had watched her husband go through chemo, radiation, and surgery, and he was miserable the whole time. She didn't want that for herself. Her family supported her. Over the next year, she gifted items to friends and family, told us to write our names on the things we want, take what we wanted, and so on. There were conditions. No, you can't have that. It's a family heirloom meant to go to aunt and her kids, or to dad and his kids. We all knew what those items were and who they were going to, so that was easily settled after she died. The house was inherited by my father, who very suddenly and unexpectedly passed away 2 weeks later. I inherited the house at that point. The next-door neighbor, we'll call him Todd, came over several times, upset that he and his kids, who are 21 female and 19 male, weren't invited to Grandma's funeral. There wasn't one. We were all too busy reeling from my father's death. And they weren't presented a copy of the will. It only included family members, by the way. And he knew Grandma loved his kids like her own. She didn't. She complained about them coming over all the time, stealing her water to fill their pool, and she had to tell them to stop calling her Grandma. He wanted to know if I would allow his kids to go through the house and see if there was anything they'd like to take to remember her by. Okay, first, dude, my grandma died 4 weeks ago, and dude, my dad died 2 weeks ago. I thought it was awfully rude of him, but I offered to let him go through the boxes I had packed, that I was planning to donate, and he was offended, I mean mortified. He said his daughter and son had their hearts set on some items that were family heirlooms, and I literally laughed at him. I explained they were family heirlooms and would be staying with me, and two of the items had already gone home with my brother. He said,
"My kids were her family and she would have gifted those to them. They should have been included along with everyone else when everything was divided up."
Keep in mind that none of us knew this guy or his kids other than the neighbors next door. There were never any family gatherings that were held at her house, and the only time I ever heard her talk about them was when she was complaining about them, especially when she caught them using both her hoses to fill up their pool, and then came over complaining because she had to put locks on the outdoor faucets. Luckily, Todd's house was in foreclosure, and he moved away about a year later. I have more stories, but those will come later. I would have slowly shut the door on him, making eye contact so extreme and uncomfortable with a twitch in my left eye. Like literally, WTF is wrong with that guy? Isn't it your job to touch my baby's dirty nappy? I'm currently on holiday with my husband and 2-year-old at a remote seaside village here in Crete. We were setting up at the tavern next to the beach, and one woman walks up from the beach looking to a waiter. When she finds him, I hear her say, "I have some rubbish. Will you dispose of it for me?" The waiter says yes, and she hands him, from what I can see, a bulging nappy that isn't wrapped up, but like full open and stretched out so you could see the insides that were orange-brown. How appetizing. The waiter made the funniest distrust face I have ever seen, and said, "I'm not touching that lady. The toilets are over there," and pointed towards the back of the tavern. I was holding back my laughter, and my husband was too. The nappy lady then started waving the nappy at the waiter, yelling, "What terrible customer service! You're so rude! Where's your manager? Did anyone else see how you spoke to me? I'm a paying customer," while looking around at the other tables. The waiter then just turned around left, which was such a fantastic response to her crazy, and the lady was left there speechless. At that point, my baby was fussing, so I turned to tend to him, and I'm not sure what happened next. I would definitely not like to see a waiter handling a dirty nappy and then bringing my food. Those are serious biohazards, in my opinion. Entitled man at the post office. My mom just left the post office. My mom's over 65 and has a total knee replacement a few years ago and will need the other done soon. Basically, both her kneecaps are bad, so she had just gotten in her car and was looking up directions on her phone to her next location. A male Karen parks right next to her and gets out of his car to knock on my mom's window to ask her if she has a handicap pass, as she's parked in a handicapped spot. She has one that hangs, not her back license plate. She's had one for years and renews it regularly. She indicates that she does have one. He demands that she proves her right to park. She refuses. He badgers and threatens to call the police. My mom says, "I'll do it myself," and calls them. She is on the phone with the police when a lady comes out of the post office. She tells the man to stop this foolishness and move his car, as she needs to pull out. He huffs and leaves. Why do people feel entitled to your info? And why does a woman of color need to prove her right to be in a public place? Entitled college roommates were mad I didn't cook for them, and they wanted me to pay for the ingredients. I refused, and they threw my stuff into the trash. I debated telling this last story after the whole saga with my mother-in-law and ex-wife, but I mentioned it before so many times that I might as well tell it. It'll probably be my last post here. I know it seems I dealt with a lot of terrible people in my life. I suppose it was just a magnet for it. My terrible mother, my terrible ex-wife, my terrible mother-in-law, bad coworker that gave out my phone number to her mother, and lastly some bad roommates from my college days. But beyond that, I haven't really dealt with much of anyone else. No, I've got good friends, a good job, and I'm physically active. But there were times I was just drawing in narcissists. Hopefully there will be no more. Back in college I had to deal with 3 bad roommates. Guys for 6 months, and it was community college, so no dorms. Just a rundown apartment that looked right out of the 80s. I was balancing school and part-time work, so I didn't have a lot of money. Funny thing is, I was literally the only one there who knew anything about cooking, much less did dishes. I wasn't one of those hardcore couponers, and there was really only 2 good stores in walking and biking distance. One was a typical supermarket, the other is a small discount food store. That's where I went the most. I also was no stranger to the local thrift store. My roommates mostly ate junk food or whatever else they could grab that there was already made. So, for obvious reasons, I couldn't keep leftovers. We also had fights about them not doing their share of the cleaning. But that was resolved later as well. 2 of these guys said they were friends before college, and the 3rd roommate fit in right with them for a while. The drama over the food first started when I made myself an egg sandwich for breakfast. 2 eggs over easy or medium with your choice of cheese, bread, and mayo. It's actually pretty good and a solid breakfast. One of my roommates saw me eating it and asked for one too. I apologetically said no because I was on a tight food budget, and the frying pan was already in the sink. He rolled his eyes at me and groaned. I told him they were easy to make for himself if he bought the ingredients, but he balked at the notion. Another day I made mashed soft-boiled eggs for breakfast, and that attracted more attention. It's eggs boiled just enough to where the whites are cooked, but the yolk is still liquid. You then peel the shell off and mash the eggs in a bowl with a fork. It can be easy to mess up, and I only really succeeded half the time. But it's great with just basic seasoning and sometimes hot sauce. I haven't made it in a while, but I like to eat it on toast and sometimes over rice, and I also made egg salad from time to time. Eggs were cheap and basically $1 a carton at the discount store. I'm also not a big fan of cereal as I had to eat it a lot growing up, and prefer a warm breakfast without a lot of sugar. No matter how much I told my roommates they could cook their own food, they let me show them how. They just kept complaining that I made food when they weren't allowed to eat. Even though they wanted to eat good food at home, they were completely unwilling to put in any effort. Compared to these guys, I was the only broke person there. They all had the latest gaming consoles and new laptops. One of them even had a car. I had an old N64 and CRTV that were pity gifts from friends years prior. A GameCube I splurged on, and used laptop I got secondhand. My roommates were near constantly gaming, watching YouTube, and being general couch potatoes when not in class. I think they thought I'd be a pushover at first, but I'm not the kind of guy that seems chill, till you push me one step too far. And they did this by stealing my game systems and my food. Here's what happened. One evening I made something good for my dinner. I don't remember specifically what it was. It might have been tilapia fillets. I ate those a lot. Even made them into spicy fish burgers. My roommates all ganged up on me over how these dinners always sucked unless they ate out. Microwave food all around them on many nights. And they wanted me to finally make something nice for everybody. I told my roommates that if they each kicked in $5, I'd make us all a nice spaghetti dinner the next day. They agreed. My biggest mistake was not collecting the money from them in advance. I went out, got the ground beef, a jar of sauce, a loaf of garlic bread. The noodles and canned green beans were a side. I whipped up a great dinner, but when I wanted the money from each of them, they laughed at me and refused. They played what they did off as a joke. When I didn't accept that answer, they told me that they were sick of me flaunting my cooking around them and never sharing it. I gave them all the finger and told them I would never cook for them again, and I stuck to that. They tried several more times and I always refused. They even offered to pay me again, but still refused to pay me for the first time, so I'm sure they would have just pulled the same stunt again. Money or no money, I had my pride, and I meant it when I said I'd never cook for them again. They started acting like kids whose parents wouldn't feed them around me, and they were pretty angry when I called them out on it. I wasn't obligated to be their caretaker, but I didn't know what kind of homes these guys came from. But they certainly weren't used to getting their way, not getting their way. One day I came home from work and found all my food missing from the fridge and cupboards, and none of my roommates were home. I was furious and couldn't even confront them, so I just tried to go play video games and unwind. But my consoles were missing, and I lost my mind. I went to see an acquainted neighbor living in one of the apartments down the hall and asked advice from him, because he was the one who sold me the GameCube. He had an evil idea, and said he'd use his digital camera to record my roommates when I confronted them if I wanted, but only if I paid him $20. I didn't really have a choice to, but I agreed. When my roommates finally came back, they were all smug, until they all realized their gaming consoles and laptops were all missing. They flipped out and threatened to kick my butt, but I held my ground and told them I wanted my stuff back or I'd never tell them where their stuff was. Turns up they bagged up all my food and threw it in the dumpster outside a few hours earlier. Then they hid my game systems and TVs somewhere in the building before taking off to a party. I asked them why they did that, and they claimed it was because they had been drinking all day since it was a weekend. Then tried to say it was a stupid, drunken joke, while also telling me I had gone too far. I laughed and said they were enormous hypocrites and a-holes to say I went too far after what they did. I just got even. One of them looked like he was ready to hit me, and I drew all their attention to the nearby window. And that's when they saw our neighbor outside at his window, recording everything with his digital camera. He gave me an okay and took off down the fire escape before my roommates could do anything. I told them the guy just recorded their entire admission. That was bullying, theft, and underage drinking since they were all under 21 at the time. I told them I would take the recording to the dean if they didn't make things right. Because they wouldn't like having that stuff as part of their records, it was well known a couple of girls had been ousted from college for a roommate bullying the previous year, and drinking while underage is a huge no-no. They all looked like the color had drained from their faces. I told them I wanted my stuff back now and the cost of my food reimbursed. It was their move. They all took off outside as fast as they could. They came back with my game systems and games in a garbage bag and even retrieved my food from the dumpster and expected me to just take it. But I refused to touch the food because it had been in the garbage for hours, and I would only accept cash. Additionally, they dropped my TV and it was broken, so I wanted that replaced too. They all hemmed and hawed, but finally asked me what I wanted. I said I wanted a new TV and $60 cash from each of them. They asked why that specific number. I said $50 each to replace the food they tossed, $5 each for the spaghetti dinner that they reneged on paying for, and then what remained for having to pay the guy to wait 2 hours outside our window in the cold to record them. They all got their wallets out and begrudgingly gave me the money. They had previously bragged about how they had parents and scholarships footing their bills, so they easily handed out the cash. After getting paid, I told them where to find their stuff I had hidden, and they stopped bothering me. One of them had a small flat-screen TV in his stuff and just gave it to me to replace what they broke. And then we called things even, but after that they avoided speaking to me if at all possible. Though eventually they all started getting on each other's nerves since I'd ruined their fun. They also never brought alcohol into the apartment again, for fear I'd snitch. And they did try to harass the guy I'd paid to record them. He said he'd take the recording to the dean himself if they bothered him again. So they were shit out of luck to do anything about that situation. When the lease renewal came, 2 of the roommates opted to move out of the building because the third guy now hated each other. Yeah, they all hated me, but the 2 that left were especially the worst. They liked each other just fine, just didn't bother to keep tabs on them once they were out. And the few classes they had together, they kept away from me in. And the one roommate that had stayed actually made some improvements as a person, and made sure to tell the new guys who moved in not to mess with me at all. One of them was pretty cool though, and he actually liked Nintendo and bikes. He became my best friend, as still is to this day. We even still play Mario Kart together when we can, and took up cycling together once again I separated from my ex-wife. He's been my greatest support ever. More so than any family I've ever had. Also, for those wondering where I hid my roommate's stuff, I hid them in their own suitcases that were already put away in the closet, which would have been one of the last places they would have looked. They were all so angry that it was right there the whole time. TLDR, entitled roommates with more money than me who I wouldn't let mooch off my cooking, took my game systems and threw away all my food and them as a prank. I hid their stuff and recorded them admitting to what they'd done as evidence. They paid me back and never messed with me again. And that's the end of today's video. I hope you all enjoyed today's stories. If you did, remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and leave a comment down below. I will see you all next time. Hasta la pasta. Bye-bye.